Hey everyone, this is Movieman, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And I have a special collaboration today with a very special friend of mine. He is a solid and entertaining film reviewer, and he is certainly not afraid to let his inner grump emerge when need be. And even better, he's a ginger. And who doesn't love that? So, without further ado, my guest slash collaborator and just all around awesome person, IMO Reviews, aka Elliott. What's going on, man? How you doing today?
Oh, thank you. That was a lovely intro. I could get used to that. Thanks for having me on the channel. I'm really excited to do this one.
Now, before we get into the reason why we are both here today, please feel free to let everyone know who you are, what they can find on your channel, and what exactly IMO Reviews is all about.
So IMO Reviews is pretty much an opinion-based review channel for movies, video games, TV shows. We try to be as diverse as we can. We've been looking at some Studio Ghibli movies recently because it's actually something I really haven't looked into that deeply, apart from the obvious ones like Spirited Away. So I was trying to have a bit of a deeper dive. But yeah, generally speaking, we just have fun. We talk about films that we love, films that we hate, games, TV shows, and we also do hot takes, which is becoming quite popular, where we discuss the hoodoos of cinema, the things that you're not supposed to talk about. And if they're too controversial, this guy gets drenched with water. So there's some incentive in there for you as well.
Yes, and I have to say that anyone who is willing to potentially start an electrical fire just for the sake of content, I mean, that is dedication. Okay?
That or just pure madness, one or the other.
So, as far as the nature of our collaboration today, it is actually a follow-up collaboration. For those of you who have had the chance to check out our top 10 WTF film collaborations back in April, there are plenty of unique and eccentric and just way out there films that we had the chance to explore and discuss. And in the wake of that collaboration, I actually spoke with Elliott and we figured, at some point it would be cool to follow up on some of these films, to actually watch them and just kind of see like what the conversation would be like after having this collaboration and having the opportunity to dive a bit deeper. So my main recommendation for Elliott was my number 7 pick, which was Mulholland Drive, directed by David Lynch. Now, there's a whole lot to be said about this film, but before we, jump in too quickly, I would really like to know, Elliott, what your awareness was of this film going in, and when I did recommend it, what was going through your head.
It's a movie that I've always heard about, seen posters of, but it's always been so vague. No one has ever sat me down and said, it's about this and this happens and then it becomes this. It's never happened. And generally speaking, when it came up in conversation, people would just sort of smirk and go, oh, that movie, I get ya. They'd sort of make it out to be this mystical unicorn, but they'd never divulge why. So it's always been one that I've been acutely aware of, and it's been quietly shaming me for years because I probably should have seen it by now and I haven't. But I am really glad that I have now. And as you say, I have a lot of thoughts on this movie.
Absolutely. I know I gave some of my thoughts, but it was one of those that because I was somewhat young and because it was just coming out, there was no other conversation about it. So whereas you kind of knew like, this is a film I probably need to see, it comes up in conversation, it's always that film. For me, it was just like, oh, what's this? I want to say it was one of the first times I'd had like a video on demand experience. And it was there, and it was like, oh, okay, well, let's check this out. And it was quite the experience, as you might imagine. If anyone I thought should watch that film, it would be you. Of course, your tastes are varied. You seem to really be open, to having a unique film experience, and that's absolutely what this is. In your own words, how would you describe Mulholland Drive?
Oh boy. So it seems to be about an actress played by Naomi Watts, and she recently arrives to the mystical, magical land of Hollywood where everyone's got a dream and everyone's gonna make it. And there is this undertone, this undercurrent to the film that it feels like it's not quite real, but it does. There's something about it you can't put your finger on, where you are questioning things in the background and your surroundings as to, is this quite as it is? Am I getting this as it is presented, or is there something darker underneath? And as it goes on, the layers definitely thicken and deepen and become much more harder to decipher. And you are sort of at the movie's whim. You are just sort of sitting there waiting for it to give you more, to put this puzzle together. But I suppose it's more about how Hollywood can have an effect on these actors and actresses, how much pressure there is, the inside of studios and the decisions that we don't necessarily see, all for art, essentially, all for just public consummation. And then how many of these get churned out yearly, and how common is this type of behaviour? I thought it was a really clever movie. It really put my brain into overdrive, and I sat with it for a while, really trying to put it together like a jigsaw piece.
Yeah, that sounds very, very accurate to my experience. Although, because I was so young, I didn't have I don't want to say maturity, but I just didn't have the awareness or kind of the experience to be able to assess it as is. It was just like someone just took a camera and decided to throw random things and random events and random story elements and just said, hey, none of this has to make sense. So, of course, my experience was a lot more negative. But I'm actually kind of glad it worked out that way, because there's something to be said about an experience that like evolves over time. Like, some films you watch, it's terrible and it just kind of stays that way, or it's great and it kind of stays that way. Doesn't really fluctuate too much, but there's something to be said about a film that just gets better and better and better and better each time you watch it. And that was absolutely my experience. Now, as far as your expectations going into this film, I did touch on it in the collaboration and just kind of, and even past that point, kind of really pushing it, pushing you to see it. What were your expectations going in now that you knew, like, okay, I have to check this film out?
I thought you sold it really well on the original live stream. I was genuinely intrigued and interested and thought, yeah, okay, this does sound like it's something I could get my teeth into. David Lynch is a director I really need to look into a bit more. I've seen a few here and there, but I haven't seen all of them, and I do like him quite a lot. I like how adventurous he is. I like how much he makes you think about things. So yeah, I was actually quite excited to finally sit down to do it. But because I know it's quite a big film to digest, you also kind of have to be in the right mood. If you're a bit tired from work, you might be better just chucking on an easygoing, simpler watch than Mulholland Drive. Yeah. But once I found myself in that mood, I waited for Mrs. IMO, because she also hadn't seen it and she wanted to know what it was all about. And I'm really glad we watched it together, because I had that person I could look at and say, am I nuts? Is this makes sense or doesn't make sense? It was nice to have that person to bounce off with and make sure we were on the same wavelength.
Now, as far as you getting to the halfway point, if you can kind of recall where things were and where your headspace was, what was going through your mind, and just like, where were you in that moment? Where were you kind of thinking, like, as far as how the film might conclude or close out?
Do you know, I had a few theories bouncing around in my head that maybe, well, it's not accurate, so I can say it, but I had a theory that maybe the two main characters were the same person, possibly, and it's maybe being an actress, that this is a figment of her imagination, that she's playing out who this actress person is that she sees herself as. That wasn't accurate at all. So it was constantly the case with this movie. I would think I'm latching onto something, think I've got a fish biting on the hook, and I'd reel it in every time, and it would just be an old stale boot. And I'd think, what is going on? How am I not piecing this together? It kind of made me feel like a detective, but a really bad one, because I couldn't stop trying to put it together, but I just kept on coming to the wrong conclusions and the wrong answers.
Yes, again, very accurate. And so coming down to the conclusion, like that final frame, silencio.
Oh, yes.
And film is over, what is going through your mind?
That was probably the most confusing part of the film for me. Because the ending does give you a lot of the answers that you've been looking for, but it still doesn't spoon feed you by any means. So you're quite preoccupied with taking it on board, putting it where it belongs, piecing it together, getting the narrative structure. But meanwhile, mad things are still unfolding. And there is a moment towards the end of the film, which I'll discuss in spoilers, but it was a curveball too many. And I just went, what the hell are you doing, David Lynch? You've gone too far this time. But once the film ended with Silencio, and I was silenced by the film as if to say, wow, what the hell was that?
No, what the is going on? I'm not gonna do this to day. What the is going on?
Me and Mrs. IMO sat and talked about it, and it was just so much fun to pick it apart and see the pieces that made this bigger machine tick so well as it does. So I was completely baffled by it, but I also absolutely loved it.
Man, and like I said, it's hard to explain when the gotcha or the light bulb came on, because like I said, it took many watches, and I think the first few were just like, oh, I remember this weird movie. Is it as weird as I remember? And then it's like, it's hard to explain, but it's just like somewhere back here or somewhere deep down, it was just like things were starting to kind of click into place, and I was just like, oh, well, I didn't notice that before.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if that means, but what about, And I think that's a big part of why I wanted to do the WTF collaboration, because as, wacky and zany and, over the top and confusing and all of that, as much as we do have that experience with these films, some of them or maybe even most of them, there is something that, brings you back to them. There is something that just stays with you and sticks in your mind, and it can be really rewarding. Not every film, of course, but usually it can be very rewarding if you stick with it and you're willing to just like put the puzzle together, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. I've only watched it the once, but like already the second it ended, I said to Mrs. IMO, I will definitely be watching this again in the future. And I actually think, as you say, it will grow even deeper. I'll see even more that I didn't see the first time of asking. I think it's only going to be even higher ranked for myself as I revisit it in the future.
Now you have to let me know, and there are plenty to choose from. But if you could come up with 3 of your biggest WTF moments from the film, you have the floor.
Just 3.
3.
Well, to mention the one I mentioned earlier, where it was a curveball too many, towards the end, where the tiny old people came crawling out of the blue box that the tramp suddenly had behind the diner. That was a moment where I just had to hold my head and say, okay, what, you've lost me now. You've lost me. I don't know what's happening anymore. It really just caught me out of nowhere. That there was nothing else, at least to my knowledge, there was nothing else in the movie to suggest that was going to happen. And I am actually still a little bit 50-50 about what it meant entirely. I think I got it. I think it's supposed to be a representation of her, sort of her innocent past that's catching up with her, that's maybe haunting her a little bit. But I'm still not 100% sold on that idea. If someone else has a better reading of it, I'm all ears to hear how other people have interpreted that scene. But I love that that's the way it plays out, that it is so open to be seen how you want to see it, really. So that would be the first one that pops up to my mind. The other one's not quite as mad as you think, but it's because I'm probably never going to forget the imagery, just because it grossed me out a little bit. In the meeting about the movie with the strange board executives who are telling Justin Theroux's character, this is the girl, they make one of the guys an espresso, and it's supposed to be the greatest espresso in the world. And as he sips it, he then just like sort of pukes it up over a napkin. And I was sitting there like, oh God, no, this is... Oh, yeah, I'd rather he spat it back into the cup than spit it onto a napkin and have it all spilling over the sides and everything. That was a bit, okay. And again, I still don't really get that scene. I think I get it, but I'm not sure. I think I might need to go onto YouTube and look up some Mulholland Drive explained videos just to see if I am definitely on the right path with the film in all the places. The third WTF moment for me, it's probably the most obvious one, but it's got to be the blue box. I really liked it though, because I feel like it's the film's magic trick. Like David Lynch knows what the blue box is all about, but the audience don't really need to. It's important that David Lynch gets it, and it's just a matter of the fact that the audience need to experience it. Whatever it is, just experience it, and then you will get the outcome that you need. And I like that shroud of mystery, that uncertainty of what that could mean, how metaphorically you could look into what that means, or just on what it actually meant in reality of the situation. So it was a very bizarre part of the film that really caught me off guard as to how it comes about in the movie, with it opening finally and dropping to the floor. That was another moment of, okay, where are we going now? But I did really enjoy how it was used. It could have been so easily turned into a MacGuffin or a gimmick that all of the characters need to get their hand on this prized blue box. But I feel like David Lynch was smarter than that. I feel like he really did something clever with that idea. So as much as it baffled me and blew my mind, I actually really like that aspect of the film.
Right. 3 really great choices. Now, starting with the first WTF moment, I actually understand what that means now, and you're not far off. As far as the second, I actually forgot about that. So I'm gonna have to go back and watch that because I did totally forgot about that moment, which is interesting. And then 3 was definitely my biggest one, especially the first time around. But it's always one that just always circles back to me, just in my mind, just like, and even just the angle, like it's just like it's like this close up, and it's like, and
Yeah.
then we go inside, and then all of a sudden, and I think I said this in the collaboration, after that happens, we enter a totally different film, and I'm just gonna leave it there, and it's like,
Oh, yeah.
what just happened, and just trying to work through, just the experience and trying to piece everything together, because I didn't understand. I'm pretty sure I had never watched a film that had utilized duality like this, to where, I mean, the Nutty Professor doesn't count. I mean, Eddie Murphy dressed up as different characters. I mean, if you want to count that, the whole multiple characters, that's fine. But I had never watched a film where this character looks like this, played by this, actor or actress, then all of a sudden it's the same character, but not the same character, but played by the same actor or actress. And that's why it was very difficult to try to understand the point of all that. Now that you've seen it, I've seen it. Do you have any questions about it that you might want me to answer or think I could answer?
Well, I don't know if you can answer, but it is a big one that has been looping around in my mind that I can't find a solution for. I don't understand what the tramp was all about behind the diner. I don't know what that was supposed to represent. I don't know if my very flimsy reading of it is that if the old people are a representation of the innocent naivety, is the tramp a representation of the guiltier side, the things that she's not quite so proud of in her past, the things that she quite literally hides away, which is why the tramp's hidden away behind the bin. But again, it's very flimsy. It's quite loose, but that is my reading of it, but I'm not convinced.
Yeah. And the thing with Mulholland Drive is that there's a lot of open-endedness and ambiguity to it, and it's one of those things where you could technically read it the way you want to. You can kind of derive your own meaning from it. But a lot of what you said is what I took from it, especially when I think about when we do see Diane at the diner later on, and that's the same area where we first see the tramp, and you see that she is going down. Like, this is kind of the point of no return. Like, this is the last, bit of innocence and hope she has left, and you are now taking a completely different turn down this other path. And so I think that that's a big part of what that represents. I was not ready for that character to appear when it did. And it's so funny. I don't know if you knew this, but the actress who portrays the tramp is the same one who portrays, I believe it's Belloc in The Nun and the Conjuring series.
Oh wow, I mean, yeah. Now you mention it, I could kind of see it. Yeah, oh, that's a great bit of movie trivia.
Yeah, because like I said, I saw that back in like I want to say 2001 or something like that, 2002, and all these years later, it was by accident because I always just kind of look up stuff about movies and the behind the scenes and things, and I just so happened to see her name, and it said something about Mulholland, and I was like Mulholland Drive, and then it said the Tramp, and I was like, who is the Tramp? And so I looked, and I was like, are you serious? It's
Boom.
crazy. Yes, like it was crazy. It's like all, and not only the fact that it was like it's been so many years. It's always interesting, like when you have an experience with an actor or an actress, like when you're young, and then it kind of circles back that way. And then to
Oh
be
yeah.
that character, I mean, that's a very memorable horror figure to a lot of people. Mulholland Drive is not horror. It's very horror-ish to me, but
Yeah.
that moment was very intense and very horror adjacent, if not horror itself. So yeah, that was a great moment for me. Yeah, but I think that is what the Tramp represents, and a lot of, and I will admit that it is weird holding the box and the old people coming out. And my interpretation of even that piece with the old people is that you see Betty when she's coming out of the airport, and she's having this conversation and they're wishing her well. And I think that when we look at life and we think of like grandparents or elders, they usually are these very positive inspirational figures that just give us hope, that give us encouragement. And we always, not that we're always necessarily thinking of them in mind, but whenever we kind of get down, that is what we kind of reach back to. It's like we have had this support system of those who have lived life and just want to see us, do our best and be our best. You get the sense that something is even not right with that, because when they're sitting when they're sitting in the back of the car, it's kind of like this should be a happy thing, but something is very eerie about this image.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so I think, and then at one point when you see the jitterbug contest kind of imagery swirling around, you see like the dancing and all that. It looks like at one point, I don't know if they circle back around at the end, but you see what is either Betty or Diane standing with those same two people. So I think that might have represented a point where her hope was kind of ignited, like she won this contest, and it was a symbol of her talent and her potential. And then we're just going to continue to build up from there. But there's the reality of life, and there's the reality of
Yeah.
Hollywood and the industry, and all these seedy dark elements that you aren't told about. Oh, and a couple of reviews, but most notably Last Night in Soho, I made a comparison with Mulholland Drive and Black Swan, and how there's just this narrative of how we idealize Hollywood, or how we idealize the stage, the screen, and just, fame and all of that, but we don't understand what goes on behind the scenes. And it is dangerous to kind of go into that territory and not be prepared for it, because what that can do to you, it can change you into a person you never thought you would be. And so when we
Yeah.
get to the end of Mulholland Drive and those old people emerge again, it's kind of like, ha ha ha, you failed, like all your potential, all your hope, ha ha ha, look at you, what are you now? Which is actually really disturbing to think about. It's
Yeah.
disorienting, it's weird, but if you kind of think about the inner torment that someone would have when you have so much hope and idealism, and you look at how life can kind of really disrupt and undermine that, it's really horrifying in a different way. And I find that Mulholland Drive scares me way more than a lot of typical horror films,
Oh yeah.
because the music, the environment, even some of the positioning of the angles, and it's something in the background. Like, do I hear something? It's very disorienting, and it's very unsettling. Like, this is not a film I think I could watch late at night, because it would just put me in this frame of mind where I feel like I'm not safe in my own home, even though it's just a
Yeah.
film. So yeah, Mulholland Drive. There's so much to pull from, but please continue.
No, that's an excellent point. I also agree. I do find films like this strangely more scary than watching The Conjuring or The Nun, for example. I think with a film like The Conjuring, you almost know what you're going to get. Whereas because of Mulholland Drive's nature, you're always in the dark. You're just sort of feeling around for what's to come. And it's usually something bad that's coming. And I think because a lot of it's quite psychological, it can, in a way, be relatable. You might not have experienced this story or be an actress who's chasing fame, but people have dreams and hopes and aspirations. People fail all the time and people get down in the dumps about failure. And we do all have those demons in the back of our voice going, do you remember that really embarrassing time that you did that really embarrassing thing? It's very human. And I think that's what's genius about Mulholland Drive and why it's scary. It's got a very human nature to it and how the human brain ticks. Quite striking when you take it on in that way. But yeah, I think that's an excellent point you made.
I absolutely agree with all that. Even what you said, oh my gosh, that that struck me like right here when you said, remember that really embarrassing moment, that time? It's just like I don't know why the brain will just conjure up those things at the most random moment. It's almost like I have to like, oh no, 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 no. It's like I almost have to literally like push it out of my brain because it just will pull me into that moment. It's like, no, 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 we're not we're not doing that today.
Yeah.
So no, that is a great point. I liked the idea with the blue box kind of opening us up into reality. I
Yeah.
liked the parallels that we see. Like I think once you go back and watch it, like a second and third time, and you see the names in a different context, you see the characters in a different context, and you see like kind of what the like you kind of see the 180 from one reality to the next, and it actually makes
Yeah.
sense because you think about Betty is this hopeful idealistic dreamer, who not only is just a good person at heart and good natured, but she's a great actress. And I think one of the most compelling scenes, despite all of the dark elements throughout the story, the moment where she goes to that audition, because
Oh, yeah.
and she like knocks it out of the park. And it's so interesting because Naomi Watts is an actress playing a character, who is auditioning and trying to show her skills as an actress. So it's very kind of layered to see that happen.
Yeah.
But she like just obliterates that whole moment and even takes control because you're kind of aware that in that moment the guy is not necessarily above board in that moment, and how she even kind of like subverts that, like, no, 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 you're not running things here. And it's a great moment. Just the other characters she comes across and what they represent in that reality. Even though you get the sense that something is very wrong with this world, there are moments like that where you do understand that in this reality, why it's so important for the characters to serve the purpose that they do.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it, actually. But yes, I think you're right. I think on a second watch, there's going to be so many little details and factors that are they're just blink and you'll miss them if you're watching it for a first time. But there's so much weight behind those little factors. Whose name is this? I remember there's a waitress at the diner towards the end, and I think the name badge of the waitress is one of the other characters that she has applied differently. So yeah, it's a very clever movie. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been to write this to write this story and piece it all together in his mind before even going into the filming process.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, if I could only sit down one day and have a conversation with David Lynch, or better yet, like just take a trip inside his mind for like a couple of hours, I can't even begin to imagine what I would see and
Yeah.
how everything would work. So yeah.
No, that's very true. Sometimes it's better to just imagine rather than go there.
Right. Did you have any other thoughts?
The first thing, I wanted to say thank you for such an excellent recommendation. This was just such a juicy piece of material to sink my teeth into. I'm not kidding when I say this has been playing through my mind for a few days, putting little details together. I'll be doing the washing up and then I'll think, oh, I think I know what that bit at the 20-minute mark means now. Let me think about it. Let me put it to maybe go on YouTube and see if I've got that right. So I really do love movies that do that to you, that they don't pander to you. They don't treat you like an idiot. They don't go, here comes the airplane. They just throw it at you and say, either figure it out or don't. It's up to you. So I really did enjoy the movie quite a lot. Not, the performances are excellent. Naomi Watts, as you mentioned, she is, wow, outstandingly good. She probably deserves more credit than she gets sometimes. And I don't actually know who the actress was for the other character, the other lady, but I also thought she was great. And Justin Theroux, who he's amazingly young in this movie. When you see him in projects now, you're like, wow, yes, that film was a while ago, wasn't it? But yeah, a terrific film. One that I'm really excited that I've finally seen, and I feel almost like a quite proud achievement to tick it off of my movie watch list. And I will definitely be checking out again in the future to get that deeper understanding and try and get my nails into it a bit deeper.
Absolutely. I'm glad that I could be the one to just kind of be the catalyst for you to take the leap and actually watch it. And
Yeah.
I appreciate you just kind of trusting me with that one. I mean, even if you absolutely hated it, we could still have a conversation about it regardless. But the fact that you have that appreciation and kind of that cinematic appreciation of what it has to say, and even things you don't understand, the fact that you were willing to take the journey, you're still willing to revisit and learn from it, I think that's awesome. So I definitely appreciate you just being willing to do that.
No, thank you. And I'll gladly listen to future recommendations as well. I actually went as far as thinking that this might be an IMO Hall of Famer if in the future I rewatch it. Because after the first watch, I could totally understand if someone said 6 out of 10, 5 out of 10, because there are so many aspects where you're like, I don't know what that meant. But the longer it stays with you, I think I wrote a note somewhere saying that Mulholland Drive is a frustrating watch until it isn't. And when it isn't, you suddenly your brain starts tingling because it's all coming together and you're starting to see what's trying to be said. And I think as I spent more time with it, that 7 out of 10 became an 8, became a 9, became a 10. And as I think more and more about it, and I think if I have another watch with it that's equally as positive, I think it's going to get the 11 out of 10. I think it could be an IMO Hall of Famer in the future.
And listen, people, those don't come easily. If you have watched any of Elliott's reviews, you know that more often than not, we'll get something toilet related instead. So it's really important if a film makes the Hall of Fame.
Oh, yeah. Only the special are allowed in that one.
Okay, so that wraps up our thoughts on Mulholland Drive. Thank you, Elliott, for joining me. This has been such a rewarding discussion. This is not a film I get to discuss with a lot of people, either because they haven't seen it or if they have, it's like, what? So I'm glad to be able to, connect with someone who just has an appreciation of it and is just willing to, go a little bit deeper beneath the surface and just really get into everything that makes that film the masterpiece that it really is. Unsung masterpiece in some circles, but still very much a masterpiece. And if you are still with us, then you can hop over to Elliott's channel, IMO Reviews, because we are about to discuss Elliott's recommendation for me, which was 2014's Predestination, starring Ethan Hawke. And I have so many thoughts. So please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe over on Elliott's channel. Hop right over, and I hope you enjoy the continuation of our conversation.